Good evening.
Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from Global Net and from Enfield Voices, and this is a sort of special webinar, something different to what we normally do, because we're looking at what's a local issue, but it's also a national issue as well, and that's about local democracy. We're supposed to be a democratic country, and we are in terms of elections. We go into a ballot box and we see the names of candidates listed, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, and we vote for them. But very often we don't think, how did they get there? How did they get onto the ballot sheet? How were they selected? And this webinar is going to look at how they were selected. Is that selection open and transparent? Does it involve a lot of people or a small number of people? Is it vulnerable for takeover or for other practices that we might be suspicious of? And can it be improved? And to help us with that, we've got two people who want to be or have been councillors. You can see them here now. I'll bring them on. Emma Bishop Laggett is a person who served as a councillor in a ward in the London Borough of Enfield, and I think she didn't win, but I think she wants to be a councillor in the future election. And we've got Alan Sitkin in the left-hand corner. And Alan, he was a councillor rather. He was also a cabinet member in the London Borough of Enfield, but he didn't stand the last time, and they're going to join us in this discussion. Anyhow, a lot of you may not realise exactly how people get selected, and we're going to discuss that. But I thought it might be a good idea to start with by asking each of them how they were actually selected, how they got to be a councillor. So I'm going to start with you, if that's okay, Emma. Could you tell us, when you wanted to be a councillor, how did you go about being selected in order to stand? What was the process you went through?
Process is going to be the subject of the evening, isn't it? Due process. I think I'm like everybody, well, not everybody. I think it's to do with once you become interested in politics, and then you look at political parties and then you make decisions about where you're going to sit. You've forgotten your introduction, the Green Party, where you're going to sit in your political allegiance are best met, best thought of. And in my instance, it's Conservative. And you sort of pitch up. And of course, the first thing you're given when you arrive, when things are working well, is a warm welcome and a bunch of leaflets to go and deliver. And it's your job to sort of show that that you are able to turn up. And then I guess it's a question of getting, like most organisations, being known, seen by those who are organising. And so it's more leaflets and turning up and just starting to partake in this new world. I'm a clinician by background, so my world is very clinical. So the world of politics is something I sort of started to realise was having an impact on my life, genuinely my patient's life, my client's life, my family life. So I wanted to get involved. And from then, I honestly don't think you walk in without thinking you're going to do everything. But then people start saying, "Oh, have you ever thought about being a councillor?" Which is always a opening statement. And instead of running, which might be the better idea, it's sort of said more than once. So over time, more leaflets, more door knocking, more partaking, more sort of seeing, does this fit you? Obviously timetables swing round, they're fairly stuck, and you find yourself sort of thinking, well, do I really want to do this? This is a big commitment.
But when you decide that, I think what we're interested in, what is the process you went through to be selected? I mean, who selected you?
Oh, okay, I'll be more personal. The process is straightforward. They have a timeline, which they obviously have to meet. They call for interested parties, and then there is the creation of a long list and a short list. And the idea is that initially people are vetted to go through, and we can have some conversations about people who have slipped through that very important vetting list. But the idea is then a long list is created through an interview panel of the members of the executive and others, and then the shortlist is created. And obviously there's an awful lot of ebb and flow as you get through to the final deadlines. But for me, it was interview over a panel for a long list, and then interview by ward for shortlists.
So the ward actually gets a chance to interview. And how many people would turn out in the ward for that interview?
Again, it depends on the wards, and they're well advertised across, but like all political parties, we are not as many members. So on average, they have to be quorate, and they have to have enough people to make it make sense. I think we could always do with many more turning up, but 20 to 30 would be great. Sometimes it's been less.
And Alan, in the Labour Party, what is the process there?
So it depends to a certain extent on how many people are active in the party at a certain moment in time. And if you can let me go back a little bit to where I started, because we were talking about this earlier, but I'm a bit older. So just a general thing. I've always loved politics. I never even considered running for a dog catcher, but my kids grew up, they left home. There was a big hole in my life. And all of a sudden it seemed like a time or never. And I think there's a lot of people who do that to finally do politics. And one last thing before we get back to the Labour Party specifically, Francis, is one of the Michael Moore movies in the 1990s. Remember that Fahrenheit, the different movies that Michael Moore made actually in 2000s. At the end of one of the movies, it is big generic saying, you're interested in politics, so why don't you do it yourself? And I saw that one evening. And I kind of thought, oh yeah, go for it. You know, you got a bit more time. You've always loved politics, go for it. And to say that I went for it, I had no thoughts of becoming a councillor at all. I just joined the Labour Party. And like Emma said, there's a bit of buzz. See, back then there weren't that many people. There weren't enough candidates for all the wards in Enfield. Take that. Things have changed a lot. But we're talking about 2000. First time I was a candidate was 2006. And somebody talked me into being a candidate. I had no idea what it involved. And, you know, you don't have that much time. There's strange stories I can tell you about the 2006. But anyway, I lost, and that's fine. By 2009, I wasn't that, you know, I knew more about it. What happened is that Jeff Roden, a friend of mine, close friend of mine, he was going to retire. And so I went to a selection meeting in Beau's ward, where Jeff was. There was one other rival. I mean, there was Yasmin and Achilles were already there, but they were going to stay there. There was one other rival. I don't think it was quorate. So it was the EC who decided. The EC had known me for a while. I think Jeff recommended me. And that's it. I used to tell people I'm the young Jeff Roden. I took that as a great honor, actually.
So, I mean,
that's what happened in 2010.
Yeah. So you went to a ward meeting, you were selected by the ward that wasn't quorate, so the executive selected you. So obviously there weren't many people there. But in order to go
and that's very different, yeah.
But in order to go to the ward, Alan, was it on Jeff's recommendation, or did you have to, like Emma, go through being on a list beforehand, which is chosen by, for example, a local government committee?
So yes, I had to go on a list. And that is still, and by the way, the story I told you, that's from 2010. Things are very different today, if only because the number of people who are involved. You don't have these lack of quorate things anymore. The thing that we should be discussing tonight is not, and I'm taking you off into a past history of the way it used to be. But I am aware that the things we're talking about today are very different. Yeah, Labour Party has and still has a system. You put in by a certain date, you fill in a form, several pages where you write things down. You send it off to, I think it's the LCF, Local Campaign Forum, which has emanations from the three CLPs, the three constituency Labour parties in Enfield, same way countrywide. There's a big debate about who should be on the board of the LCF. And again, that's a very topical debate right now. But the fact is, there's a first screening at a broad level at LCF, and there's certain conditions based on which they're supposed to throw you out automatically. Yeah, but I mean, if you don't get thrown out, then you're free to put your name down for whatever ward you want to stand in. And me, obviously, all I knew was Beau's. I'm the young Jeff Roden. But otherwise, you're free to put your name down. And it's a question of knowing the membership of each individual ward. Because on D-Day, on one particular night, when they choose the ward council, the ward candidate for that ward, you want to have all your friends there on the night. And that's the real conversation we're having tonight, is about packing selection meetings.
Okay, well,
I think I told you both.
Okay, well, let's look at that. Let's look at that now. I mean, from what you're saying, both of you, you wanted to be a councillor, you had to put your name forward, you went on a list, and some sort of committee, whatever their name is in each party, selected you.
Can I just interrupt you there? I think it's really important to say that I wanted to be involved. I mean, I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, and I have a sense of duty and a sense of service. And there is an element of, you know, do with my abilities what is best for the overall organisation, the party. Where am I best served?
So you have to believe in yourself, which means that you actually go forth to your fellow party members and say, actually, I should be your candidate. I can do stuff.
Yeah.
And so you want to do stuff. So
That's right.
Emma's right. That's part of it, Francis.
Yeah,
Which is
that's right. But you see, you can talk about your motivation. That's fine. But the question is, how do you get selected, given the fact you have the motivation, you have a family background, and we've discovered that there is a list. You then go to your ward meeting. There are not many people very often at the ward meetings you would like to have. In the case of Alan, it wasn't even quorate. So,
but no longer. Labour Party.
Okay, well,
I would jump to Alan's defence here. I think it's really important to say that we all have, both parties, we've had the good, the bad and the ugly step forward and say that they're good enough for the position. We've certainly had our problems. We had, somebody's gone to jail. Michael Fadaka has gone to jail for voter fraud.
Oh yeah, I forgot that.
Filled all the forms in, and we kicked him out, but Enfield North got suckered in by him, and he, you know, his Majesty's prison. So that they will put themselves forward. So it's very difficult for associations to have a wide, warm welcome, and also make sure that people like him are not stepping in the door and saying, "Choose."
We've had a similar problem.
Yeah, well,
I
mean, I know you get those sort of people coming in, and I understand that. But let's look at this other problem of who selects you, because it is your ward. Now, we know that, for example, the Labour Party has about 560,000 members, which is quite a lot, which is 850 per constituency, which would make in 10 wards about 85 members per ward. Now, if you're lucky if you get a dozen of those turning up normally. Conservative Party has about 100.
Totally changed, Francis. That's wrong. Totally changed. That was the way it was. I don't know, a decade, 8 years ago in the Labour Party when I was doing my stuff. But the way it is today in 2018 is not at all like that.
Well, explain how it is then.
Labour Party meetings have loads of people. Now, I haven't gone for quite a long time because I'm quite angry for X and Y reasons. But they have loads of people. And the thing is about representativeness, you know, because you end up having the people who will turn out on a great Thursday night, they become self-selecting.
Yes.
Right?
And that you've got to watch for that. I completely.
You think? Yeah. And that happens, you know, we have problems currently in Enfield. We have two problems, in my opinion, in Enfield. And Francis, you and I were speaking earlier about Falkirk 4 years ago or 8 years ago. These meetings get packed, and it's not always very nice the way that happens, because it doesn't always enhance democracy. It enhances democracy on that one evening. But people are within the party, old political hands are very aware of the game. They know what they're doing. These things are organized years in advance. That we sign up enough members to make sure that on one night, and we'll give them lists, and these are the people you're going to select. And I don't know. I mean, it's democratic in the sense that on that one evening, in that one building, the people voting for candidates A, B, and C will have the majority. But what goes behind that is heavy stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand that, and it may have changed, and you may have more people than you used to have, but each ward has about 7,000 electors, and the number of people who select the candidate is still small in proportion to that.
Well, agreed.
And because it's small, it is vulnerable to takeover, isn't it? Exactly. You mentioned Falkirk, which you know, Falkirk was accused of Unison trying to make members on the quick in order to take over. Enfield has got a problem now because of that. The Conservative Party, as you mentioned them in the past, has problems in some areas. You know, it was claimed evangelical Christians were taking them over in the wards.
Oh, hang on a minute. Let's just stop there. Stop there. I'm coming back into that. So
Let's talk about David Borough.
I'm going to interrupt there. I've been the chairman of the selection panel, and I can assure you we go to huge lengths to listen to candidates, because I think you're very brave to put yourself forward, but you also have to look out for those people who are putting themselves forward for wrong motives. You know, the outcome is a local resident who can go to their local councillor, and, you know, we're all informed by where we come from, but we're calling Enfield our home, and we're going to work on our citizenship. We're going to go forward. And it is a really tricky problem to take people who put themselves forward. And that's why the tried and tested method of how many times have you come out? How have you delivered? You know, where have you been? Where do you come from? They're honest questions, but the truth is we need to encourage diversity, etc. And I think selection panels go a long way to making sure that they stick to process. And certainly we've had our issues that the jail sentence is, you know, sort of a zenith of our, that's the wrong word, out of our experience. But in the main, these are, you know, decent people stepping forward, knowing that it's not their personal prejudices that are coming forward. They're representing the wards as residents and engaged residents. And they know that that everybody they know isn't a party. There isn't
Not always.
Not always, but in the main, the residents are coming forward, not just in their own voice, but to represent their wards, because they know that not everyone's going to turn out. We have a system and it's flawed. You can argue about it until the cows come home, but it is the system. And I think having long list creations, checking the credentials of those who put themselves forward, and then allowing individuals to then apply to specific wards is still a good way of going about getting local.
But Emma and Alan, I'm not talking about the candidates themselves. I'm talking about the people who come and vote. If you have small numbers in your ward, it's easy for people to try and make new members, like Unicon did in Falkirk, by trying to, you know, union members to sign up. In Enfield, there's now accusations that in some areas groups of people have been brought in at the last minute. The same happened in Sandwell. And when I mentioned evangelical Christians, I wasn't talking about the candidates. I was talking about board members coming in, new members of the Conservative Party in that case. Both parties have had these problems. Now, don't you?
That's why it's about balance.
Yeah,
it's about balance. Your selection committee needs to have a sort of a general approach to it, as in a general military campaign, and say, I need some balance here. I need to cover all areas.
Yeah. But Alan, you know that people can be brought into these wards and can pack meetings very often.
Yes, and they do a lot. First of all, I hear just one thing. It's different in the Conservative Party than the Labour Party, and I hear what Emma says about not scrutiny, a panel, a selection panel, you called it. And we have that at a broad early level. But number one, the question is how rigorously the members of the panel actually apply. You know, parties tend to have minimum thresholds below which you can't be a councillor for a good reason, because, you know, public life is supposed to be clean and nice, right? Absolutely. So there are these thresholds, and I think even if you would hope, I mean, certainly the Conservative Party, I know they pay a lot of attention. It's not so much put out to the general public. It's more the leaders of your party, the leaders of your local party, who I think take it upon themselves to make a lot more decisions. There is a kind of an early level screening for the Labour Party, but afterwards it's just your ward, your ward meeting, your branch meeting in your ward on one particular night. It's all about D-Day. And you can theoretically do nothing for years and years. And I know some people do very little. And you can theoretically not be interested in politics because you want to see a better world, but because you think politics will get you closer to power. You can theoretically have all these motivations and still fairly easily within the Labour Party get selected council candidate in a safe ward.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing about a safe ward. I mean, and this is why the issue is crucial. When you have a safe Conservative or a safe Labour ward, selection really is effectively election, isn't it? I mean, once you're selected, you're going to be elected in those safe wards.
Yes, of course.
If it's a marginal ward, if it's a marginal ward, it's different. So that the selection process becomes critical for all of us. We want to know that it's open and it's transparent. We want to know that it can't be packed by special interest groups of any kind. Are you both confident that in your two parties, the system is open, fair and transparent, and it's not vulnerable to takeover by members being packed into meetings in order to favour certain types of candidates, or
No,
known that to happen?
no. I'm going to let Emma speak first if you like, Emma, but I can tell you already, man. No, I'm not confident.
I'll speak first because we're all aware of the problem with the current Enfield Labour Party, and it certainly wouldn't pass straightforward clinical corporate governance rules having that many members of the same family. So let's stick to the broader picture, because I'm not here to do any kicking. I'm really not. I'm here to sort of say,
I am.
Okay, well, the process is that we're encouraging people to put themselves forward. The Ask Her to Stand campaign, the recognition that we don't have enough women in Parliament. Certainly the first time I was asked to stand, I had young children. My little girl was still only little, and I recognised I needed the time and the space to bring her up. So I got involved in other ways. There are other ways that, you know, committed people can commit to the organisation. And running the selections was a very interesting, sometimes bumpy road. But I am confident that when the wards come together, but you're right, we do need to encourage members to step forward. So like you're a very engaged citizen. We need you to join your wards, your local branches, and turn up. And we do need to, as all organisations, look to working cleverer and smarter, and maybe looking at electronic voting. So it isn't just a room where people have commitments, people work. You know, it's very interesting as candidates. You know, there was a roll of honour idea. Well, actually, some of us work for a living, and we work at evenings, and we work on Saturdays, and that's me. So that, you know, where if I'm not turning up on a Thursday, well, that's because I've actually got something other to do, and it's just as important. So I am confident that the Conservatives have got a decent process in place. Is it worth exploring further? Absolutely. Should we be working smarter? Yes. But we are working very hard to make those long lists good, so that the short lists, as they go forward to the wards, they've got decent candidates who to choose, who are committed to being current councillors. There are only 17 of us at the moment against 42, and the Labour Party's got a lot of problems to sort out in Enfield.
Okay, but Alan, are you confident that the Labour Party's got a system that's fit for purpose?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not confident. I think the proof is in the pudding. And I was just writing down here, wondering where I should answer based on process, which I can do and maybe will do if you want. But I think I'd rather give the first answer based on outcomes. And I'll give you a specific case of a specific individual. There was a wonderful councillor, there was a wonderful councillor in 2014, 2018 named Abdul Abdullahi. Abdul is a Somalian, lives in Edmonton. The guy was a young talent. I mean, everybody's young compared to me. The guy was a talent. He was representing a community, the only representative of the Somali community. But, you know, there's a lot of Somalis in Enfield, and I was delighted that at least Abdul was there, but he was also open-minded and broad. The guy was, like, great, and also at all levels, including diversity, because we use that word, right? He got deselected. Moral of the story is that there's something wrong with the Labour selection process. Based only on the outcomes, for somebody like that to be selected, let me say something. He was a scrupulously honest guy, okay? So he didn't play games. He didn't play games with anybody. Whatever happened there, he was out. He was blown away. There's something wrong with the process when something happens. When something like that happens, you get a bulldozer or it's a bulldozer. You get a bulldozer coming in like that. They take no prisoners. It's ugly. There's something wrong with the process, just based on outcomes. I have an idea from a process level, some criticisms we can make. We talk about these minimum thresholds that the Conservative selection panel has, and we have thresholds also at an early level. Are they applied rigorously? And currently there's stuff going out on the internet saying they weren't, and alleging that the person who let these things go wrong benefited from it subsequently. So, I mean, these are interesting allegations. So you have to wonder if there's something wrong. There's something rotten in Denmark. They said, isn't it Hamlet or something?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, anyway, that's the answer.
It is difficult. I think for us as Conservatives, the executive hold the power. You know, at the end of the day, we elect the chairman, the deputy chairman, etc., and the ward chairman, and collectively they hold the final say on the lists of people who go forward, and that's a lot of responsibility. And it does take, these things come over time, they layer up, and they're responsible for the Women's Conservative Committee, the WCC, who I refer to them as my ladder ladies. They're just wonderful women who, you know, over the years, just build the relationships, turn up, do the small things, the important things, and that's where the detail is. So for processes, when you're picking your candidates, you need to have a long timetable and a long list so that you really are assembling candidates who will continue to work with you. And I think what's happening with Labour and cousins voting for cousins and conflicts of interest and things, and this is just hearsay and also just looking in, is very concerning. And certainly people being deselected in the manner that Alan's saying, you know, questions need to be asked. And the question is how do you ask those questions? How do you challenge that? Who's holding the ultimate power? In our case, it would be our local association's executive. And then you can take it to them. And then in being positive, you would get good responses, robust answers that will work. The trouble is if you've got something rotten in the state of Denmark, then you have got to really, really ask some very challenging questions.
Okay, so Francis,
1 second. So something rotten in the state of Denmark at the local level, and then I'm reminded in 1915, an American humorist named Will Rogers said, "I'm not the member of an organized political body. I'm a member of the Democrat Party." And I might say the same thing. So what happens with us, you have these things going wrong at the local level, people start fighting locally, and you look to Labour Party Central, we call it region, to arbitrate. And then you have to rely on who do you know at region, which is already pretty distant. A lot of the time, the people at region, they can be manipulated by, for example, a person at region will listen to an MP more than they'll listen to me. Especially not me, but they'll listen to an MP more than listen to a councillor. So it's not perfect. And there's also the people at region.
How do you go about changing that on a local level? Because that's really important, because as an Enfield resident, I need to know that there isn't corruption at my level, at my local level. And I need to know that whenever there's something going on, that there are processes to get rid of it. And certainly for our thing, we've learned that processes are very important. Going back to Francis' original point, the days where you got tapped on the shoulder and said, please stand, whilst it's nice to get the tap and say, I think you'd be good, you still now have to know that there's a robust, decent, open, transparent system. You have to fill in forms. You have to have CRB checks. I'm a clinician. You can't move in my world without DBS checks, and they're really essential.
Francis, I need to say
let's take this on a bit, Alan. Let's take it on a bit, because
go on. No, I used to work.
No, go on, Alan.
You'll be happy, Francis, with what I'm about to say. You'll be happy. Just let me speak, please.
Go on.
Corruption is a very specific word. It can be used on certain occasions. I'm not entirely sure that this is the relevant occasion to unit.
I'm willing to take it back. No problem.
So, no, I know there is corruption in the world, and we're right to talk about it. I'm not sure with the things I've said so far should be equated with corruption. I don't know, but I'd like to say that. But it's good to talk about corruption when it does. It's good to hunt it down.
Well, let's be clear on this. We don't know if there's any corruption anywhere, and so we can't say that. So we won't.
But it's good to keep your eyes open.
It is good to keep your eyes open. But look, there are a number of areas where things can happen that may not go as smoothly as we like. Meetings can be packed by members coming at the last moment. A selection committee, like the local campaign committee or executive committees, can be favourable to certain people rather than others, and that causes disputes. And when it goes to appeals regions, that region could be backed by favourites from certain people as well. So Absolutely. There are all problems in those areas. Let's look, Alan and Emma, how we can improve it. How can we actually get a system that's open and transparent, that involves hundreds of people instead of a handful of people?
That's right.
How can we move to a selection system that is better than the one we've got? Now, I've got some ideas I can put to you, but let me see if you've got any ideas first. I'm sure, Emma, you probably do. Let's start with you.
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, I think you have to know that we're unusual. We're interested in politics. We're talking about politics. I'm a signed up card-carrying member of the Conservative Party, and that puts me into the unusual bucket immediately. So the vast majority of my neighbours, friends, they're not interested, but they do know that they have the duties to go and vote. And then how they vote in the ballot box is up to them. And we all respond to the democratic. So going back to the original, you're not going to get everybody involved. end of. And you are always going to be relying on smaller numbers than perhaps you would like in an ideal world where you've got hundreds of people coming. You need membership systems which engage people so that there's the skin in the game. So whether it be 50 pence or 25 pounds, which is what we ask for, if your minimum membership is 25 pounds, then that gives you the right to act in voting, and obviously in the Conservative Party, if it ever comes to it, in a leadership election, which is obviously not happened yet. But that's one of the attractions, we're told. So somewhere we need the right monetary value that we can commit to running systems, running elections, where we've got one person, one vote, and they're having a say in the ward elections once the executive have gone through due process, because we have had people step forward who I really would never want anyone near a list. So I think a vetting process is very important, and then we've got to get clever in 2018 on smart technology. It's not impossible for people. We've got a lot of people who aren't on email, but there are ways that we can get more people engaged. We're engaged here, and I'm at home. I haven't left home.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, you want to see membership increase and you want to see smart technology, and let's come to those points in a minute. Alan, how do you think we could improve it from your point of view?
I have some ideas, but I just want to say Emma's got a clever idea there with smart technology. That's actually true. Okay, so what we all agree is, what's the point of having a representative, a political representative? You elect somebody either because they're some star and you believe in they can do whatever they want. You elect them to be an autocrat or Donald Trump. Or else you elect them because you hope that they're going to represent you, right?
Yeah.
So representativeness is all we want to get. And the problem is you're not getting it when you have small meetings where you have a disproportionate number of people who turn out one night. They don't represent the wider community. Obviously, the wider the electorate, the better statistical chance you have. It's a question of normal distribution. Better statistical chance you'll have of having a sample of voters which is more representative of the wider population. So anything that can be done to open it up. Now, the problem with primaries, which is half what I'm talking about, and I know this from my American past, is it's about money. And there's a whole problem with, so I think it's got to be possible to have primaries, but where the state says your maximum budget is X. And you got to put
a limit. They already have monetary budgetary things. This is not expensive technology, though. It's just
no. I agree with you what you say about smart technology. I agree totally. I was just talking in terms of what we might do in the future if we were to open it up to primaries and let what if you had a double election? It's too high, it costs money.
What do you mean?
Let me give you an example. I mean, John Mann, who is the MP for Bassett Law, has attempted to do local primaries. For example, when the leadership election took place in the Labour Party, he decided to get the views of his Labour supporters, not his members, his supporters. And he got responses from 10,000 people. Now, it cost him a few £1,000s, and obviously he had to send stuff out. There are all sorts of questions about how valid and reliable that was and what the information
What did he ask
went
them?
out. Pardon?
Don't know.
What did he ask them?
I have no idea what he asked him, and that's a good question, Alan. But the point is that he did try to engage in a primary. Now, couldn't we get select candidates that way? In other words, try and find out who our Labour voters are or who our Conservative voters are, and then get them to cast a vote for the candidate they want to stand for.
The thing is, obviously, any measure like the one you're suggesting, Francis, that broadens the electorate is a good thing in the sense that statistically you got a better chance of getting a representative voting population. There's problems though. I mean, I know there were big allegations in the Labour Party that certain people were buying memberships for other members who showed up once every 4 years for a council selection meeting. So I mean, as I say, it's always easier to say what's wrong with the status quo than to say what the perfect system is, because I'm sure there is no perfect system. But certainly the status quo, I'm willing to put up with some of the shortcomings of these other systems because I'm really disgruntled with status quo, right? And so, yeah, well, I think we all agree, broadening it up. One thing about the Labour Party, and this is a strength and a weakness, the strength is that it's very democratic. It's just the people there who are vote. It's very nice. The weakness is that the people actually voting is that a democratic representation of everybody else. The Tories are proposing something which is slightly more top-down. as an academic who are used to having students come in front of me and take oral exams, it's a whole different way of assessing, you know, performance and capability. Whole different way of assessing capability. But I kind of understand what the Tories are doing, because it's kind of like what you do in university. You
well,
know,
in my world, we call that a viva, and actually they
absolutely.
They got rid of them for a bit, and actually they've had to reintroduce them because you know, human communication is very important. I think broadening it out and in getting more engagement is fantastic, but also you have to again look at the outcome, and the outcome is at the moment we've got an incredibly, you know, we've got 17 Conservatives to 42. Now, depending on where you sit, you still need a healthy, robust opposition, and that's a really hard position to sort of maintain. And we really need.
Hey, you shouldn't have voted for Brexit. You should not have voted for Brexit.
Well, I'm a global citizen, so I'm very happy to have voted for Brexit.
Let's get into that, okay? That's not what we're here for. But look, I mean, Emma, Emma, would you favour the primary system? I mean, your party has tried it. For example, in Totnes, they had an open primary. They allowed all the electorate to choose who the Conservative candidate would be. And they chose a very, very good MP, Sarah Wollaston. Now, Peter Hain has written, I believe, to say that David Cameron was in favour of primaries until Sarah Wollaston was chosen. Because she gave him a lot of trouble, he began to change his mind about primaries. Would you, though, favour primaries at a local level for council candidates?
I think one of my favourite things I ever heard Theresa May say is that she was very happy to be a bloody difficult woman, and I'm completely on that ilk. The outcome is important, getting good representation at a local level, and the problem with these is the law of unintended consequences, and I'm a bit with Alan on this. How much money is it going to cost? Where's it going to end? Are you still going to end up with special interest groups? I stood at Southgate Green. It's a fantastic ward. I mean, really, if you're going to live in a part of London, Southgate Green is one of the nicest. And I would knock on the door and they would open the door and say, "Are you Greek?" "No, I'm not Greek." "Then I'm not voting for you." Slam the door. And, you know, there's an element of that was quite a surprise to me, because no one's ever asked me if I'm Greek before on such a regular basis. I found it very interesting that they would only vote for that. If I had said I was Greek, then I would.
What I don't understand, Emma, is, I mean, are you saying no to the primaries? Because if you have primaries, you wouldn't be able to get those sort of interest groups so much, because you'd be extending the electorate for selection to a much wider group of Conservatives.
I'm not saying no to open primaries. I'm saying that they're an awful long way away, and it's. You know, I think that they're a lovely idea to talk about, but they do feel like fairyland at the moment. At the moment, we're talking about the next 4 years. We have got, the Conservatives, we've got to make sure that our timelines are in. I think if there was fault with us, is that this is not a surprise that every 4 years you're going to have local elections. And you need to have your candidates up and ready and allocated to the wards. No last minute changes, which is what our party did, and really make sure that the residents know. The Bush Hill Park Conservative candidates who won in Edmonton, she said she got to the stage where she would know who was walking up to the door to open it. They knew their residents so well. And then that's the game, because that really is local engagement. So door to door, knocking at the door and saying, "Hello, I'm your candidate. Would you please consider," whatever colour party, Green Party, Liberal. That's where you really make a difference. That's not primaries, that's old-fashioned politics.
But Alan, I mean, is it that far away? Because Andy Burnham, who's now the mayor of, I nearly said Liverpool, I'll get into trouble, the mayor of Manchester. I mean, he says in the Labour Party, we should have an affiliate member, which is basically a registered supporter. And we should work on developing registered members who then can vote in selections. And he's saying it's not that far away. It's not that difficult. Do you agree with Emma that it's really in the clouds, it's not going to happen? Or do you think it is a real possibility? And Andy Burnham clearly thinks it is.
So things like this only happen when one bloc or the other have a personal interest in making them happen. If people have a bloc interest in the status quo, it may be more democratic, it may be clearly more democratic to go down the roads that we're talking about here. But I agree with Emma, unfortunately, you got to be a bit cynical. But then Emma's starting to move the conversation in a certain direction, and I'd like to follow up what I was thinking out of that. if Emma's right, and this better world that we're talking about, wave my hand for the camera, sorry. If we're this better world that we're talking about, it's not for a while, then to improve the current system, I was thinking it's a bit, you need more policing. You need more policing. There's different levels at which that can take place. But when you think about the fact that the current system has major negative outcome, major problems, and we're just agreed with each other that this better system we imagine is not going to happen for quite a while. The next question then becomes, what do you do with our really suboptimal system until we get rid of it? And just to repeat, the thing that crossed my mind is we need to police it better, both inside the party, but even outside the party. Because you get elected councillor, yeah? And you have a fiduciary responsibility with public money, but it's a responsibility. There's contracts which get signed, there are deals which get made. Now, you have a fantastic officer corps which, you know, respects the rules, but there's a lot of power in being in power. So it's important that we be a bit tougher on the processes that we've been lately. Okay, so that's more policing one way or the other.
Okay, but you're talking about
more policing about the candidate selection process.
Now, hold on. You're talking about policing, Alan, in two different ways, aren't you? Policing policy, which is scrutiny and having effective scrutiny. But we're also talking about if you can't get primaries and the best system to avoid corruption, then we have to have better policing of the selection process. Yes, as well.
And you're right. Now,
what I'd like you to tell me, both of you, is if we're not going to get to the of having hundreds of people involved because we're going to have primaries, how can we get better policing
you
the
can't
selection
assume.
process? How are we going to do that? What methods can we
hold on, you can't assume that primaries are the absolute answer. They are an option that's being put forward, and it may be partly primaries and partly smart technology and partly, you know, local businesses coming together. You know, I think it's not just one answer, because if it was that simple, we would have done that. It would be that easy. It isn't that easy. People are messy. Humans are messy. And it's just a question of going back to your original words, open and transparent. So these are the datelines. If you speak English to a certain level is one of my absolute criteria. And I think we've ended up...
To be a candidate.
To be a candidate, to get on the long list, to be selected for the party of your choice, you know, you need to be able to communicate, you know, in written and fluency. The fact that you speak other languages is a bonus. I don't speak any other languages. But that kind of basic criteria is really important. Timelines are important.
Criteria about your criminal record or misdemeanors.
That's already part of the Local Government Act, and I've already mentioned the person who disgraced us.
Yeah, and it doesn't always get policed 100% on the spot.
Well, it's easier now. In the old days, you know, you couldn't find out as much, but now we're all a Google click away, aren't we?
Well, so, you talk about Google click away. Tell us, Emma, how would you use smart technology to improve the selection process, not the election, but the selection process?
Well, in my own world, I'm a podiatrist, consultant podiatrist, and we have...
And a good one.
Thank you very much. We have the College of Podiatry. We're moving now to online voting. The Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons in Glasgow is all online voting. So again, the candidates get vetted by committee level, and then they come to us as the electorate, and we get biographies to read through, and then we can vote electronically. And we're getting really 90% rates of return on voting. You know, and it's just extraordinary the difference it is when you actually facilitate it through. So the vetting process is quite important. The timelines are important, as I've said before, making sure that no one's allowed to put their name forward who has got, you know, a £30,000 fraud, benefit fraud, the 12-month suspended sentence, which is exactly what happened in our case. And that really, that we learned some lessons from that. We really have. And I think we really need to just take all those lessons and make a process that the residents can feel confident in. I would ask that people have, when you see a Conservative candidate on the list, you're confident that they've gone through a process and there's still going to be
Yeah, but what I don't understand from what you're saying is, if you have smart technology and you had digital voting for selection of candidates, who would be the electorate who votes for selection? Who would you allow to do? Would it be open primaries? Would it be just registered Conservative voters? Who would have a chance to click that button?
Registered Conservative voters to put forward a registered Conservative candidate, because otherwise you're making life far too complicated. And I think that would be a privilege of membership. That's what I was saying about trying to make different.
Actually, it's a good point. You know why? Because you get
I'm not going to vote.
You have how many conservative associations do you have in Enfield? You have 3, right? Yes. Edmonton, Enfield North, and Southgate. Yes. So do we. So, but the fact is that when you're electing candidate, for example, you don't have to stand in the CLP, the constituency where you live. You have to stand. You have to live in Enfield if you're going to be a councillor in Enfield. You can get selected anywhere in Enfield, which is one of the problems that we've had, is people getting sent a long ways away to a safe seat or taken out of safe seats. So it's an interesting idea that you would open up to members across all of Enfield. That would be already better.
But are you talking about members, Emma? I thought you were talking about
Conservative members who, as part of their membership, have a say in the selection of the Conservative candidates. That, to me, is a pragmatic, common sense approach.
But don't they already? Don't they already?
They do. They do. And that's our question is how do we engage them more? I mean, we try, like everybody else, with cups of tea and events and all sorts of things. It's engaging them. But I think it's Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. Some people have duties and they can't always turn up to that.
They want to watch TV and you can't blame them. They have duties. They're home at the end of work. They want to watch TV.
Lives. They have lives and busy lives. And those of us are supporting them. So the smart technology would be to engage them where they wanted to, but it's not compulsory, and it's never.
I mean, someone said on here that he doesn't think that electronic voting would get rid of entryism if it's just for members only. I mean, the Conservative Party, which has between 70 and 120,000 members nationally, reduces down to about 191 on average per constituency. And each ward, that will be about 19 people. So you're not going to get many people voting. That's why some people say you should have registered Conservative voters or registered Labour voters, because then your constituency becomes much bigger. If it's small, like 19 people, you're still going to have entryism. You're still going to have problems. You have.
Can I raise my hand, sir? By the way, one of the comments. Back in school. One of the comments here is from my friend Leon Roden, who's also the son of Jeff Roden, who's the guy who says he's not convinced. He's right to say that you would still have voting factories, so things could still be manipulated. Then he ends up by saying it cannot be the only methods of selection, and he's right. And I think that's what Emma was saying before. You need several, screenings. You need several. You need to have both the screening with the sort of assessment.
Basic competencies. In our profession,
and then you would open up the subsequent. But you need to have both. You need to go through several hoops. So it's right. There's not one silver bullet. Okay.
And then you need, your point, Francis, as well, that you're still selecting the person. Well, yes, we're running the red and the blue team here. So the blue candidates would be going forward, for our team, just like the England manager is putting his members forward for his team. So
Arsenal's
there's going to be a pragmatic selection.
Arsenal's in red, Emma.
Well, Liverpool's
red. The red team,
Liverpool's red.
By the way, we're getting some comments coming up, which we won't go into tonight because it's a different topic. Because we're trying to talk about party selection. But we've had a couple of meetings in GlobalNet 21 about different systems, and one system was sortition. You don't have parties. You actually select people like Greek democracy did in the classical Greek days by random selection, sortition, saying if you do that, you get rid of all corruption. But we won't go into that in a moment because that's another item. What we're trying to do. I've just
been called forward for jury service. That is random selection.
Yeah, it's like jury service.
That's what I've just been called.
That's what some people say.
The second time.
Some people.
It's quite cool. Have you done it before?
Yes, I can't believe I'm being asked.
I did it once. It's quite cool.
Hold on.
All right, Francis,
there's that's a classic example of you're a citizen, you know that's your duty, and end of. But being a councillor is a paid role. You're representing local residents. You know, I put my name forward, and I think it's not until you put your own name forward and see your own name on the ballot that you realise how brave you have to be. And I think we really
it's an honor.
And I think we have to applaud all those people stepping forward. You know, those ballot papers were full of names. They're real people, Green Party, Liberal Democrat Party, whatever, all hoping and wanting to represent their local residents.
Yeah, I mean that's fine to say that, and I think we'd all agree with that.
It's not fine to say; it's actual reality.
Yeah, well, it's reality, and it's good. It's good to say it. It's good to say it, but it doesn't deal with the problem that we're dealing with today, and it's how you improve the system. Hold on a minute. You can get other people in, but what I want to know from you is if we don't go to sortition, or if we don't go to open primaries, or if we don't go to party list primaries, we go to what Alan, both of you said, and particularly Alan, that we police the existing system better in selection.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind talking about that.
I haven't heard from you yet how you would exactly do it. Alan, how would you police the system so it's better?
Okay, you need more people. So I said that we would often complain when many things went bad over the years, like dodgy bad. We'd often complain to Labour Central, and depending who was making the complaint, it generally fell on deaf ears, but that's wrong. Now that could be, possibly it's a question of staffing, resourcing at the Labour Central, maybe there's not enough money to have people. Possibly it's that, how do I say, all we lefties like is to be nice to other people, so we don't like, doing the Solomonic thing, cutting the apple in two. We like to, smooth things over, which means we don't take certain decisions that we should. But maybe more money has to be allocated. Maybe they should increase party member fees by pound.
Everything goes up a pound.
No, if maybe it's got 500,000 people. You increase party member fee by £1. That's £500,000. You'll be able to hire X number of people who should do a job as inspectorate of the probity and integrity of candidate selection processes.
So you're talking about two things, Alan, are you? Having hold on. Having a better inspectorate, whatever that means, and you might be able to describe that to us, because I'm not sure how that will work. And secondly, having a fair appeal system. And what you're saying at the moment, there isn't a fair appeal system. Are those the two things that you're advocating?
Yes, I'm advocating both those things, and I'm also saying, and there's also, I think we were speaking about, I was saying they're not sufficiently resourced. The results we've gotten through one or the other system in the last couple of years have been awful. The number of times, that something's happened and everybody says this is wrong, and in the end, nothing really changes, or that it takes a long time to affect change, is, and this, a body of public importance needs to be run more tightly. Now, you can sit there and say it's politics, because you got, for a while you got entryism by this group and you got entryism by the other group. But it's specific, and I'm used to identity politics. I come from America. We got a lot of identity politics. I know about caucuses. I know about that. In fact, I'm sympathetic to certain aspects of it. But there's no doubt that you gotta, you can't pack selection meetings. And you also have to stop certain people from even getting on the short list.
Yes.
And that's not happening. So our selection panels are not doing their jobs.
But how do you do that fairly? Because if you stop people,
you change the members of the selection panel, Francis.
But then you have a different selection panel who may also do things unfairly. How do you assure you get one that does it fairly? You may
bring people in. You bring in people who come from elsewhere. That already happens to some extent, but
where is elsewhere? Where is elsewhere?
I mean, at this sort of pre-screening that I went through a couple of times and everybody still goes through, there's different levels of screening. There's this pre-screening, and certainly in my days, there would be a counselor, Sheila Peacock from Haringey came over, and then some counselor from South London somewhere, all Labour councillors, and they give a day we go down to Andy Love's office in Edmonton Street, and Edmonton Street, 4th Street, Edmonton, and we'd go in there and they talked to us. It was quite friendly. I had a very lovely friend of mine named Hazel Kinsler, who used to be a French teacher. And I do that French thing too. We spent my whole interview just chit-chatting away about France, right? And okay, luckily I'm a nice boy, and you know, they didn't get any dodgy guy when they got me. But it's got to be these selection panels are real serious business, and too many people are getting through.
Okay, can I bring it back to me?
I wanted to ask you about
I need to come back
about policing in the Conservative Party. Are you happy you've got a system that works, or do you need better policing and better appeal systems?
I think it is really interesting for even you to be having this conversation, this debate, and spotlights being shone is a really good thing, and residents taking attention. You got 42 Labour candidates now, and I understand
46.
42 to
46.
42, 46.
Okay.
46, 17. You shouldn't have voted for Brexit. You lost a lot of votes.
Go on, because we're running out of time. We're running out of time.
Related to each other, and there are some serious questions to be said on what are the conflicts of interest. And so, from a absolute basic corporate governance, we need to know conflicts of interest. Make sure that business deals are not in any way being compromised by people's personal agendas, making sure that these get tidied up. And your situation is these candidates, these councillors are now in for the next 4 years. Scrutinise, and we're all watching. Eyes are completely to the left now, because actually it's brought attention to itself. There have been days where we've had poor candidates, but in the vast majority of cases, it's been a straightforward political fight on territory.
Let's hope it remains the same.
This now got serious. Now we've got some serious allegations in around about how people have been selected and how the situation is for Enfield. It's very concerning, but from our perspective, I'm confident that we will continue to improve it. We have had some shockers. There's no question that the person who went to jail for pretending that he was a decent citizen is anybody's definition of a shock. And that was our wake-up call. And perhaps this is Labour's wake-up call to make sure that their systems are better on checking through and making sure.
Francis, one thing.
We're getting very close. Okay, we're getting.
Alan, go on.
No. We're getting very close to the end, and we're going to have to stop soon.
What if we brought in a non-Labour Party member?
I'm going to ask you one question, which Liam has brought up at the moment, and he said, "Why don't you have an independent electoral selection ombudsman?"
Oh, exactly what I was going to say.
Someone who's outside.
And we do that in our business now. Every panel, every hearing, healthcare professions, we have lay membership, and lay members.
That's an interesting idea.
And they're vetted and they're neutral. Just like, and all of that is really important. In fact, there's not many situations I can think of that don't have lay representation and the importance of it. It's like
I agree with that. That's an interesting idea.
So you go along with that, do you, Alan?
That's the policing it, because the hope is if you bring in people who have no direct personal interest in the outcome of selection, because they're not even Labour Party members, they would obviously be, they could be HRM professionals. They'd be given human resource. They can be given Labour Party guidelines. This is what we want in people. So that they do, they want people who aren't right wing. They want people who have similar values to us. I'd go at you there, Emma. But
there is a voting ombudsman. I've seen them at electoral council, and their job is, like, we send out people to represent, to watch other systems in action. And perhaps we need to get global ones. You never know.
No, that's interesting. Send in Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Listen. Hold on. Right. We've come.
I've been in countries where power has been taken with the gun.
We've come to the end.
This is important.
We've come to the end now of the hour's webinar, so we have to really finish. I mean, I think it's been a very lively and engaged discussion, and I think we've gone through a lot of things. I don't think we've solved the problem, and I think we have to take this debate, and it has to go on, because I think that clearly there is something wrong with the selection process, as evidence of what's happened in Enfield and a lot of other areas as well, and Emma said it does happen in her party as well. Emma did end up by saying that because of what's happened, we now have to be very, very careful about scrutiny. We have to keep an eye on everything. And I'd love to do another webinar next time on scrutiny and how we can improve the scrutiny system, and whether you can have a majority on the scrutiny committee who also controls the council. That's a big question. And that applies to whether it's a Conservative or a Labour council, and I think we have to ask questions like that as well. But I want to thank you both for taking part and for being brave enough to do it in front of everyone, and I think you all did very well, and you did very well at times of shutting me up as well, and so you get 1 out of 10 for that. So
just one.
So, yeah, well, I'll give you 2, Emma. And so that was great. So thank you both, and I'm going to end this webinar now.